the committee in relation to its terms of reference in order that it may make the appropriate preparations for the inquiry. A copy of Eskom's letter is attached as Appendix A. Eskom has not received a response to its request for clarity. In its letter of 7 July, the committee requested Eskom to submit certain documents by Sunday, 16 July 2017. Eskom duly complied with the request. As the documents were to be submitted on the Sunday, the committee informed Eskom that it may deliver the documents on Monday, 17 July 2017. The documents were submitted on 17 July 2017. A copy of the cover letter to the documents with and indices thereto are attached as Annexure B and C respectively. You are reminded that you have a right to your own legal counsel during this process. Eskom is agreeable to paying your reasonable legal fees connected with the inquiry. However, this is subject to Eskom obtaining the necessary written consent from its insurers in this regard. You should also note that in terms of Eskom's management liability insurance policy, the insurer who will be paying your legal fees connected with the parliamentary inquiry is entitled to recover those costs, those fees from you in the event that it is finally established in the due course by a judicial or arbitral tribunal that you have either gained a profit or advantage to which you were not legally entitled to, and or that you committed a deliberately dishonest or fraudulent act. We note correspondence from certain witnesses and will be addressing your request with agency. Should you require access to Eskom documents that pertain to you for purposes of Molefe's membership as from January 2017, the schedule provided by Eskom on 8 June 2017 indicates that such contributions since January 2017 have not been made. We appreciate your, the last part that I was reading was not part of the letter. It ends where it says for pertaining to Eskom for these purposes. Sorry, that was the part of the response.
So I'm a bit confused. The last time I was listening, you were reading a letter from Eskom to the fund.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the letter that I've just read now is a letter from Eskom to the fund. I'm saying, sorry, the last paragraph where it talks about Molefe's membership, that's another letter, a separate letter. It was just attached at the back.
And you responded to that letter. What was your response?
The chairperson responded to the letter. Can I allow her to?
Would you like me to read the response or just give you the gist of the response?
Just read the response, ma'am, please.
Read the response, okay. We refer to your letter dated the 25th of July in which you made the following offer to the fund. And in quotes, you are reminded that you have a right to your own legal counsel during this process. Eskom is agreeable to paying your reasonable legal fees connected with the inquiry. However, this is subject to Eskom obtaining the necessary written consent from its insurers in the regard. And then I said, we appreciate your consideration regarding the payment of the fund's legal fees, especially in the light of the fund being in the difficult position of incurring such fees in an instant which is not of its making. At the current time, the fund is not in a position to accept such offer as it does not wish to be placed in a position of a potential conflict of interest.
Thank you.
You done, Advocate?
No. So your response seems to suggest that you saw a potential inappropriate conduct if you were to accept that offer from Eskom, correct?
Yes.
Eligibility. This morning, we got almost a 2-hour presentation of all that has happened. I would agreeable that all that was said in that 2 hours would not have happened if the first issue of eligibility was sorted out correctly. In other words, if the fund knew from day one that Mr. Molefe was on a contract disqualifying him to become a member of the fund, none of the painful exercises you went through would have happened.
Yeah, I think, as indicated, that we do place reliance on the information that Eskom provides us. It is our understanding that Eskom is well aware of the rules. We've had various interactions with Eskom indicating what should be in the information that they provide to us. And I also indicated that we do not have access to information pertaining to the contract itself. So had this issue been brought to the attention of the fund at inception, I think we would have avoided this entire process.
Do I understand your entire presentation to be saying, if Eskom did not give you a form and PPX in the leg file, there's a PPX code, and that code suggested to you that Mr. Molefe was a permanent employee, was an executive at an F-band. That is what you got from Eskom.
That is correct.
In other words, you acted, in your own words actually, you acted on good faith after an impression was created to you by Eskom that Mr. Molefe was a permanent employee. Correct?
That is correct.
And we know now today that such representations were not correct. You've now factually told the committee that such representations were not correct.
The fund has subsequently received a legal opinion to the issue. The legal opinion suggests that Mr. Molefe should not have been a member of the fund in the first instance. There is a court process that I mentioned earlier on that the fund has submitted an answering affidavit to, presenting that position. We can only wait for the outcome of that court process to then confirm that that legal view that has been presented to the fund and the fund has accepted is 100% correct.
Now, Mr. Luthuli, I'm asking you a very simple question. Somebody came to the pension fund and said, Mr. Molefe is a permanent employee. That is your testimony before this committee. You have said the facts have revealed that he had a 5-year contract of employment. And you came to the conclusion that had you known that before, he would never have been a member of your fund. There's nothing that requires a court order in that regard.
Yes, that is correct.
In other words, Eskom misrepresented the facts to your pension fund.
I'm not sure about misrepresented, but they provided us with information and we acted on that information. Which information was not correct. They had indicated that according to how they categorized him, he was a permanent employee. And subsequent to that, because we had never had sight of his contract, we then learned that actually he was on a 5-year fixed-term contract.
And because of that transaction, somebody stood to benefit 30.1 million.
By categorizing him as a member, and also applying for the particular rules, invoking the particular rules, there was a cost of 30.1 million that then was payable for the cost of Mr. Molefe.
Understanding Eskom, you spoke about when you got to the Sunday article on the 16th of April. When you read the article, the first thing that came to mind was reputational risk to the fund. You still remember that?
That is correct.
I'm not going to bother you about decisions that were made by Eskom. Eskom will get an opportunity to respond to the decisions they've made. But I'm interested in the reputational risk for your own pension fund. I accept your rules do allow that the employer, the contributing employer, could purchase additional service for its members. But how do you will also equally be concerned that your pension fund does not become a conduit of paying monies to individuals that have been stolen. Is that a correct assessment?
From the fund's point of view, we have to work on facts. So we received an application from the employer and Mr. Molefe. In that application, it indicated which rules needed to be applied, that he was being retired. It was attached by an official document, being a letter from Dr. Ngubane. And Eskom had applied these rules before. So from the fund's point of view, at that point in time, there was no reason for us to question the bona fides of the employer. So we acted based on factual information. We checked the rules, made sure that the rules are applicable, and we followed the rules. Had any of this not been in line with the rules, then we would not have processed the transaction. We would have then gone back and said, this does not comply with the fund rules.
My question, Mr. Luthuli, is a very simple one. It's about reputational risk to the fund. Forget about Eskom. Do you agree with me that you can't allow your pension fund to be a conduit? In other words, to be used as an instrument of siphoning monies from somewhere and they channel through your pension fund to certain individuals. That you must accept.
That is correct, that we would never allow the fund to be used as a conduit.
Now, an individual gets to be employed for 2 months by one of your contributing employers. And you get a letter from that pension fund, from that employer, who purchases 156 months of years not worked. Does that not send shocking waves to your fund?
I think, as explained before, that from the fund's point of view, we have to look at the rules and compliance with the rules. So according to the rules do allow the employer to actually purchase that service, additional service. And also, it was not for the first time that Eskom had invoked such a rule. They invoked both Rule 28 as well as Rule 21.4 in the past. So from the fund's point of view, there was no reason for the fund to be concerned at that point, because this complied with the rules.
And your rules, do they have any cap on the amount of years of service to be purchased? Is it an open-ended purchase of additional service years?
The rules do not cap. They do not have a cap. So the employer can purchase additional service.
So if I get a job tomorrow at Eskom, and the board loves me, I work for 3 months, they can buy me 30 years of service.
The rules do allow for it. I think as indicated, there is the age 65 issue that you have to retire at age 65. So if they do buy the additional service for a member, it would go up to age 65.
I'm a 30-year-old, recently employed by Eskom. I work for less than a year. In terms of your rules, Eskom love me so much, I want to leave in a year. They buy me 30 years of additional service. In terms of your rules, that is permissible, and you see nothing wrong with that.
It is permissible.
But I understand that's a rule, that's what the rule says. The question is, do you see anything wrong with that?
From the fund's point of view, we would look at the cost of that. We do not know what informs the decisions of the employer. We do not know the relationship or the agreements that the employer and employee have formulated, because the fund does not involve itself in that. So we would act based on instruction. We would make sure that from a financial point of view, we calculate according to the rules what the cost of those benefits would be, and the employer would have to pay the cost of those benefits to make sure that the fund financially is protected.
In hindsight, do you think that you perhaps need to amend your rules to put a cap to this rule that allows, a free fall?
I think in hindsight, probably there are certain learnings from this entire process. I indicated earlier on that as soon as certain information became available to the board immediately took corrective action. One of the things that the board is actually looking at now is also revisiting the rules, because these rules, whilst they've been updated, but the base of the rules were crafted some many, many years ago. So out of this whole process, the fund is revisiting the rules. Obviously, that process is a negotiated process that has to be negotiated with all stakeholders. So it's difficult to indicate what the outcome of that process is, but we will definitely take the learnings out of this process and make sure that we look at all the rules that we have and see whether there's any improvement that can be factored into the rules.
So you sitting there today, you don't see anything wrong with the rule that allows for this unlimited purchase of additional services?
The rules are binding. So as a fund, we can only act in terms of what the rules say. And as indicated, I think there are some learnings out of this process that we are going to look into as a fund and engage with the relevant stakeholders.
The tax directive, was it the first time that you ever dealt with a similar instance where you appear to have had confusion in determining whether or not the money transferred from Transnet could have been taxed before or not. So it seems to be a simple exercise. Why were there complications?
This was not the first time that we were dealing with monies transferred from another pension fund. I think I need to just put context that I think almost 2 years or so, 2.5 years ago, you could file tax directives electronically. Then SARS changed the process and required that where someone has an additional voluntary contribution, you can't do it electronically. It must be done manually. You have to submit a manual form. So we then started changing and submitting a manual form. And the way that Mr. Molefe's tax annual form was completed is consistent with how we have completed all other additional voluntary contribution retiring employees.
The last question from myself is, see, I'm worried about this open-ended rule of yours. And you don't seem to be committed as the fund to fix the leaking hole. It is correct that you're acting in terms of the rules, but those rules can equally be amended. Is that not so?
Can I answer? Mr. Vanara, I do recognize your concern. This situation is a unique situation. In the past, the fund had applied the rules where people were over 50 and they had 10 years experience. It was a straightforward thing. And the delegation that we indicated earlier on, they delegated the administration together with the discretion to the, I have, switch off, it's on. The delegation was delegated to management. Is it mine? Oh, yeah. That was okay, or maybe it's this. Perhaps if that delegation of authority was not given to management and the board had sight of this particular instance, which is unique, which is unusual, the board would have applied in its mind in interrogating whether the rules that are unkept can be applied. But as Mr. Luthuli says, they worked in line with the rules, and they cannot violate the rules because the rules are approved, they are monitored by the FSB, their application, and we are occasionally audited as to whether we comply with the rules. Now, going forward, no such transaction will be implemented unless the discretion of the board has been taken into consideration. So as a board, we decided that we are going to revisit the rules. We are also going to ensure that discretion is not delegated. All such decisions come back to us as a board and we'll make a ruling. We would have probably have asked the questions, why? Why such a short period or whatever? Unfortunately, we admit that we did not ask those questions, and also the discretion, our discretion, we could not exercise our discretion at that point. As a new board, things had been happening, and many executives had been paid in the past following the same rules. So I think we are going to ensure that the discretions are, management brings such requests to us. If they don't comply, if they're not 50 and 10, and we are going to revisit the rules and see where can they be tightened.
No further questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I make a humble request to everyone inside here who is seated, who has a mic in front of him or her? Please move your gadget away from the front part of the mic, because that's what made the mics to to react when somebody is speaking. Thank you very much for adhering. Members, I am now going to give over to you to ask the questions. The rules still apply. Our rule is very democratic. It abides with the constitution of the country. So, Mr. Mare, could you put your questions after you? It would be Luyenge. After Luyenge, it would be Mazone. After Mazone, it would be Swart. After Swart, it would be Shivambo. And then Nobanda. Uxolo man.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. Actually, my questions was also around what the advocate had asked, but I want two clarity questions. When you get information from Eskom, in the case of if it's a permanent person, will it be correct for me to say that that information comes from Human Resources Department of Eskom? So it should be a very senior person that signs off information giving through to you as the fund to declare the code that should be filled in on such information given to you.
It's a bit difficult to maybe speak on who signs off information at Eskom, but we would expect that there's a thorough process that they go through. The information does come to the fund electronically, and we had engaged with Eskom around the codes to make sure that they understand exactly what information should be contained in the file. But it's difficult for me to then confirm, as to who and what process Eskom signs to make sure that their information is correct.
Can somebody help us from the officials? Can somebody help us to speak to the people who are working on these things? No, switch. It's not them. Please, Sound and Vision. Can Sound and Vision come to the to our rescue, please, Sound and Vision, wherever you are.